Gotcha. Thanks so much for doing this, man.
Oh, you got it. Not a problem.
Are you in the Denver
I'm
area
in,
right
yeah, I'm in Parker, south of Denver.
now? Okay.
Yeah, where are you?
Phoenix, GCU, last semester.
Yeah, last semester.
Last semester.
Nice.
Your son went
Good for
here,
you.
right? That's what you said?
Yeah, yeah. He started out playing baseball at Abilene Christian, and then had some knee problems and had to stop. So he went to Grand Canyon, graduated from there. Now he's went to PT school, and he's almost finished with that.
Oh,
So
wow, really?
yeah, yeah. So it's nice to for him to be done.
Yeah, I'm sure, especially after like going through all of that stuff when it comes to injuries and going through
Yeah.
through that aspect too. I'm sure that it was kind of a drag towards the end.
Well, and it helped him though kind of figure out what he wanted to do with his life.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I guess, kind of like just to go right into it, because I'm an aspiring sportscaster. You went into it after your playing career, after coaching as well, because you were, 15 seasons in the big leagues, 5 years as a coach after that. And then you kind of stumble across, the opportunity to be an analyst on TV. Like, did you have any other aspirations that you want to do, or were you comfortable as a coach before you kind of got offered a role to be an analyst?
That's a question I get quite often
Yeah.
because it's not something that I went to school for. Back I hate to say it because it makes you sound really old, but back when I was going to school, you had a lot less choices of what you wanted to do. So I ended up getting a degree in finance, and after my playing days were over, I had an opportunity to go into coaching. I had a couple clubs want me to manage their AAA club right after I got done with my playing career, and I just decided I didn't want to be away from my family that much, and the job that I had allowed me some flexibility to still be home. And then I got a call out of the blue, and Jerry Dipoto, who is the GM of the Seattle Mariners now, had been in this role for a year, and he decided he wanted to get back into coaching. So I got a call. Hey, I live here. What do you think? You want to come interview for it? I was like, sure. I have no idea what I'm getting into. Uh, and it was kind of funny because I went to this interview, talked to the general manager of our TV station at the time, and he goes, all right, come back in a couple of weeks and I'll have you, test with the play-by-play guy. And I said, sure. So when I come back from my interview, I go into this really just a studio. We're calling the game off a monitor of old VHS tape that you plopped in. And, for one inning, we sat there and called the game like that. I didn't know how I did. And so I got a call back. Hey, you want to come back again? This whole process took about two and a half months. And I thought I was just going to end up going back to coaching that next year. And they said, hey, you want to do it? I said, sure, why not? Because I can always go back to coaching if I stink too bad.
Right.
And now I'm getting ready to go into my 16th year. But those first couple of years were rough.
I'm sure. I was going to kind of ask you about like those learning curves and those early kind of growing pains on the air. Because I'm sure you've looked back at those first ones back in like 06, 07 and think like, wow, I've really, really grown as a sportscaster.
I kind of cringe sometimes when I
Yeah.
look at it because it was literally no training. I had that, go to spring training, and then opening day comes. And luckily, I kind of cut my teeth on a pre and post game show, so that helped a little bit. But about 3 weeks into it, I got my first game, and I just remember it was almost like I went back to my first game in the big leagues and how everything happened so fast. And I was just like, oh my God, that game just ended. I don't know what I said or how I said it. And it's a much bigger learning curve than people think. Because I used to sit on the couch going, oh, heck, I could do that. And we get a lot of people that still to this day say that. But there's a lot more that goes into it. And looking back on it now, I'm just thankful that they stuck with me and kept giving me an opportunity to grow and get better.
I think that's like you said, like a lot of people sit on their couch and think like I could do that. Like that's 99% of like the Twitter fan base, right?
Oh my
That's
goodness,
why they
yes.
get on broadcasters so much because they think it's so easy. You're just talking about the game, but there's just so much more that goes into it. And like me just learning out of the past 3 years of doing it at school. You now 16 years deep into it. What's your normal game prep? Has it evolved over the years? Has it
Yeah,
changed daily?
yeah, it really has, because when you first get done playing, not to say I wasn't prepared, but I didn't know how to prepare the right way.
Right.
And so what I prepared with was kind of what the guys were going through, and that's great, and that's something that you need, and that's what an analyst is supposed to do. But there's other things that you need to be able to explain too, and I think that's kind of where I've evolved. So what happens in the morning for me, kind of like the day of a game, in the morning I'll get on the internet, I'll look at the other team's website, I'll read the out of town newspapers or the bloggers or whoever it may be, to kind of, because they got a little bit of a pulse on their club. And so I'll read those and look at those, get a lot of work done before, notes in my book. And then when I get to the stadium, I'll put the lineups in, write some more notes. We get a note package, game notes every day for the game. And then the fun begins for me, because I get to go down in the clubhouse, not this past year,
Right.
but in previous years, and I hope it comes back this year, where I'd go down to the clubhouse and be able to talk to the guys. And sometimes it wouldn't even be about, hey, the game, but just how you doing? How's the family? How are the kids? Yada, yada, yada. And so you learn a lot about a player when you're not asking him questions about baseball, and you can kind of figure out what makes them tick. And that's what I really like to get into. And then of course, going out and watching batting practice. That is my Zen time. That's when I really, because all my prep work's done, and I can just go and kind of relive what batting practice was like without the pressure of having to go out and perform that night. And so when I look at batting practice, I'll watch guys, maybe I'll be watching maybe their feet and what they're doing with their feet, or I'll watch the infielders throw, or the outfielders do their work. That's really where I gain a lot of information, and just trying to chat a little bit with the guys around the cage, not a whole lot. And then go back up to the booth, maybe grab a bite to eat. And then like 15 or 20 minutes before the game, I don't do anything.
Yeah.
I just kind of zone. I just take it all in, relax. I don't think about what I'm going to say, because we're ad-libbing for 3.5 hours. And so you got to feel confident in what you're doing, because you put in the work. And that's what I feel right now, is I've got that routine down on how things, how I want to present things.
Oh yeah, 100%. Whatever makes you like most comfortable in those situations, because you're doing it on a day-to-day basis. 162 games, obviously not this past year, but in a normal world, 162 game season. Or how many off days do you have throughout the year? You're not calling all 162, are you?
No.
Yeah.
So prior to this past year, our contract was we televised 150 games, and I worked 136 out of the 150. This next year, obviously, it's going to go up to 162. I'm still going to do around 135, 140. And not all of them are calling the game. I still enjoy doing the pre and post game shows. If you take too much time off, you kind of lose the
Right.
flow of a season, and you lose, because when you're there, or when you're with the club every day, or watching it or calling it, you really learn what's going on. You learn, who's hot, who's not. So if you take too much time off, you kind of forget about that. Because I look at baseball is 162 chapters in a book, and each day is a new chapter. And so if you skip a couple chapters, you're like, oh God, I got to go back and figure out what just happened before I can move forward. And so that's why I don't do anything else in the off season. So this is the only life I've known. It's the only thing I've known from February to when I get done.
There you go. So in
Yeah.
that context, like obviously, like you said, like during the off season, it's your time. Like you get to refresh and everything, and then of course you mentioned doing like pre and post game stuff. Is that kind of like a nice, not like a break, but kind of alternative as opposed to being
Yes.
live on a broadcast?
Yeah, it's a different dynamic.
Yeah.
It's a different way to kind of present information, because you don't have as much time. You can't get into some stories that you'd like to do. It's more of a scripted format, at least on the pregame show. On the post-game show, it's reacting to what happened in the game. But the pregame shows are very scripted. And so that's what makes it a little bit different compared to the game or, calling a game.
Right. And of course, like throughout the game, you're able to, implement storytelling as well as calling the game action and analyzing it, where pre and post game, like you got to know when you got to go to your commercial breaks. Things are kind of more timed in a sense like that.
Yes.
Do you prefer being an analyst on a broadcast as opposed to post? If you had to.
I do. Yeah. I mean, I do. I do prefer that because you're into the game a little bit more. You're invested in every pitch and every, for 3 hours, you're locked in. With the pre and post game, you get, you're on for 10, 12 minutes. And then you got your producer talking in your ear saying, hey, we're going to go to this highlight. We're going to do this. So it's a little bit more structure, where the game, you don't know how it's going to unfold and, how tight it's going to be, or if it's going to be a blowout. And how do you fill the next 6 innings when the score is 10-1 after the 3rd inning? So that is just different dynamics.
So when it comes to game prep, and like you just mentioned, like if it's a 10-1 game in the 6th inning, 4th inning, anything like that, where storytelling comes in, how much prep do you have like on the side? Like, okay, I can turn to this, and then there's other games where you don't necessarily need it at all.
Well, sometimes you'll go into a game too where you've got a copious amount of notes, and you're like, I'm locked in, I'm ready to go, and you use a lot of them. And then other games you have all these notes, but the game doesn't lend itself to that. The good thing that we have a stats person with us. So he's constantly feeding us information. He's one of the best in the business because TBS uses him in the postseason. Brian Anderson uses him on broadcast, and that's how talented he is. Yeah. And so he really helps us out when we get off onto a tangent that could not even involve the game when the game's kind of lopsided, and he's feeding us some information that might help interject some more into that story. So we have help in that regards. But also what we'll do is we'll just kind of surf the internet during those times and figure out, hey, did you see so-and-so hit for the cycle for the Dodgers today? And then that might spur us on to another conversation. So it's just kind of learning what works. But the great thing about it is my play-by-play partner, Drew Goodman, and I have been together now for this is, as I said, our 16th year. So we have a relationship that goes far beyond just calling the games. That we're buddies now, and we've played phone tag 3 times today, just trying to catch up. But we talk quite often.
I mean, building that chemistry, like you said, going on 16 plus years now. I mean, you can tell when you have chemistry on the air with someone and when you don't, whether it's, at me at the college level or you guys at the pro level. So it being, 16 plus years with the two of you, how would you say that, your chemistry and your bond has kind of evolved from, 2006 all the way up to now, 2021?
Well, he gave me a lot of help when I first started out, and just kind of really, I want to say, set me up for success, like a good coach would do.
Right.
Put you in a position that makes you look good. And he did that for me. And then over time, just calling so many games, and then not only calling the games, but then going out afterwards and maybe grabbing a beer and talking about the game again. And, hey, what about – so there's a lot more that goes on besides just showing up at that time, doing the broadcast, and then going your separate ways. Now, that's not to say at the end of the season we don't get sick of each other. It's like, okay, we need some downtime. But it's great because we like to say it's like a married couple right now, where we kind of finish each other's sentences, or I'll say something and he'll look at me and he'll go, I was just going to say that. Right. So it's so comforting to have it. It's like a pair of shoes that you wear, and just like, oh man, it just fits your feet so well.
And in being, 16 years, obviously it's worked because you guys have been there for 16 years now. And just looking at him and his craft, kind of honing what he does, How self-disciplined do you think Drew Goodman is? Working alongside him, his game prep, his mentality, and then like you said, shifting focus after the game, just like relaxing, having a beer, just like talking as two guys, two human beings, and kind of having that on and off switch when it comes to his work.
Well, the difference with the play-by-play guy and a color analyst is we're kind of just reacting to what we see and what we felt and what it was like as a player. Remember that situation? I was in that, and this is what happened, and this is what the guy's thinking. Play-by-play guys, it's a totally different animal. And it was really interesting because I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, Drew took the day off. He gets 10 games off a year. So what they decided to do was put Ryan Spilborghs and myself in there in the booth, and we kind of bounced being the play-by-play guy every other inning. And oh mercy, that was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And so, play-by-play guy has to be prepared. He cannot just wing it. He cannot just go in there and go, oh yeah, today we're going to call this baseball game and not have any notes or anything like that. And so that's where, to me, I've always felt like Drew is one of the most prepared guys when it comes to a broadcast.
I mean, you're next to him for as long as you've been now, and like getting a few, like dipping your toes in the water when it comes to play-by-play. Like, did you have like a general sense of knowing what to do when you find?
Well, I mean, you do. You think you do, but it's different. The hardest part for a play-by-play guy and just doing it is going to break and coming out of break, and trying to fill that time and be talking while you have a producer in your ear and your thoughts are coming out of your mouth and he's counting you down 5, 4, 3, and you're like, ah! And it's really hard to make sure you stay on the same train of thought that you had. So to me, it was going to break and coming out of break.
Oh man, that's so interesting. And you were alluding to it earlier of, going down on the field, interacting with players, kind of like getting to know what makes them tick, like you said, separating the human from the brand, so to speak, the athlete, the player, because like you said, like they'll get to talk to you about a lot more things that you could potentially talk about on the broadcast, if not. Do you think, as a former athlete, as a former player, you're able to connect with guys a lot more than, say, a play-by-play guy?
I think so, because I know what it's like to be down there. And you think about, at least in baseball, there's just been a little over 19,600 guys that have played in the major leagues. Yeah. So it's a very small fraternity. And so guys know that you understand what they're going through. And I'm not going to bury them. I mean, there's mistakes, and I've got to call it out, and I've got to be able to say, what happened. But I don't have to attack them personally. And because what you have to remember too is every single game, every mom, dad, girlfriend, wife, uncle, brother, cousin, whatever, they're all listening to the game. And so if you say something, and you have to have a relationship with the player, and you say something that they don't quite agree with, they might not talk to you. And so it's a fine line that you're walking every night, but you still have to be truthful on what you saw and what happened. But you can do it in a respectful way. And I think that's the point where I'm at, that the guys understand that, hey, I've been there. I've made 3 errors in a game. I've struck out to end the game. I've lost a game. I've won a game. So I've done it all. Right. And I always tell people, after playing for 15 years, and there's nothing that's probably happened to you on the field that didn't happen to me.
Oh, yeah. And of course, you kind of have to have thick skin in both shoes, whether it's a player or you guys up in the booth, kind of, figuring out like what that even thing is when it comes to what you can say and what you can't say. But at the same time, if they're performing poorly, then what are you going to do? That you really can't have their backs in those situations.
Yeah, and that's a tough line you walk every night, because you don't want to be we get criticized because we're homers too much, and I get it. but at the same time, I don't want people to turn off the TV. I want people to still watch our product. And we have a partnership with the ball club. And so I'm not going to degrade anybody in what they're doing. And it's the difference now in what it used to be is all the social media and how guys deal with that and what happens with social media. Because before it used to be, hey, whatever was written in the paper, that was about it. But now it's just so much more that the guys have to deal with, what we have to deal with. And you do have to be able to say, hey, you know what? I know I'm prepared. I know I do the best job I can every night. You're going to like it sometimes. You're not going to like it. I can't help that. I just know how I go about my business, and I can put my head on the pillow every night and say, yeah, I did the best I could.
How do you
Now, that's not to say, well, hold on. That's not to say that sometimes I don't come out of a game and go, oh my God, why did I say that? Why? Oh, but as I said, we don't have a rewind button. We don't have a delete button. We don't whatever comes out of our mouth is out there.
Right.
And so we don't have that luxury of being able to take some words back where you can start to write something, oh, I don't like that, and then let me delete it and I'll think of a different way to say it. Sometimes we do say stuff, at least I have, that you go, man, why did I just say that?
How do you think your generation would have dealt with social media and all that, with Twitter and Instagram, people coming at you 24/7? Because in your era, like, that's prime time. Like, the Yankees were those dynasty teams,
right?
Cal Jr. Like, how do you think that your generation would have handled everything that these players have to handle today?
I don't know. That's a great question, because it's a different dynamic today. It's a different set of issues that every player, because they're also walking a fine line as, hey, I want to build my brand. I want to get my brand out there. And how do I do that? Yet people are attacking me if I've had a bad game or I've lost a game. But if I have a great game, then they're praising me. So where do you draw the line to play? I don't know what the answer is to it, but a lot of these guys have grown up with it. So it's just been a part of what they've done even before they got to the big league. So I think if you have that, I think it is a little bit easier to deal with. But I know some players that refuse to be on Twitter. I know some players that refuse to be on social media just because the attacks can be ruthless.
I mean, they're smart. They're smart for doing that. Have you ever, or you and Drew ever get, tagged on Twitter with some pretty bad remarks when it comes to broadcasting?
Well, Drew, I'm not on Twitter for that reason.
Good.
My dad taught me a pretty good lesson growing up, and it doesn't involve social media, obviously, but he always told me, don't seek advice from people that you wouldn't first go to ask for help.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of people on Twitter that are offering their advice, but I wouldn't go for help. So that's why I'm not on Twitter. The only thing I'm on is Instagram, and I like telling the story of Instagram. I like the pictures of Instagram, but everything else, no. But Drew will send, during the game too, because he's on it, and he'll show me some comments. And every once in a while, I'm like, dude, I don't want to see it. Just keep it over there. I don't want to see it.
I feel like he'd be the type to fire back, though, if the opportunity was right, like a smart comment back.
Oh, yes.
As long as he's staying safe a little bit, I feel like he'd be the guy to fire back.
Yeah, he comes from New York, so He's got a little bit different personality than I do, where I'm a little bit more laid back in what I do. Drew's got a little bit more of the, hey, I'll come right back at you. And a few times he's typed something and he's shown me, and I'm like, no, you can't send that. You can't. And so he'll delete it, but he will, when it's really warranted, will go back after somebody. And he's had some people apologize. And so, that's okay too.
I feel like a lot of those guys on Twitter don't really expect them to fire back too. Like when they get that notification, like, oh man, this is real life. I forgot.
Yes. Right.
And one of your sons was pursuing broadcasting as well, right? I saw he did some work with the Frederick Keys
Yeah.
years ago. Has he ever dealt with anything like that? And have you given him
Um,
advice regarding anything like that?
well, again, he's kind of grown up with it, so he's on there. Yeah, he's done 2 years worth of minor league broadcasting back in A ball, high A for the Baltimore Orioles in Frederick. He decided that he needed to do something else. So he's still dabbling in it. He
Right.
does some college hockey. He works for USA Hockey. So he was just up in Edmonton in the bubble with the World Junior team, not calling games, but just working on their social media site. So he understands that whole world and doing that. He would still like to do it. It's just a tough industry to break into. And as you know, there's once guys get the job, they're hard to they don't leave very often.
Oh yeah, I mean, you see that everywhere.
Yeah.
And from that perspective, like me as a young aspiring sportscaster and many around the world trying to break into the business. I mean, just in like Arizona State alone, those guys have like 500 plus guys at the Cronkite School just battling it out for
Uh-huh.
time, whether it's as an anchor or a porter or a play-by-play guy. What do you think from what you've seen, or some of like the biggest mistakes that young sportscasters make, whether it's like on-air stuff, the way they're telling a story or calling a game, or even when it comes to social media stuff, trying to have to watch their mouths on Twitter or on Instagram?
Well, I think that's the biggest thing because employers will go back and they'll look at stuff. Um, I just think be a good human, treat people nice, and make sure that you don't burn any bridges. Um, I'll tell you a quick story on kind of how there was a guy that was in the big leagues that was playing, and um, I won't tell you who it is, but my boss at the time, we were looking to hire another guy. Well, this guy had come and said, "Hey, he'd been out of the game for 5 or 6 years. Oh, I'd like to try for this job." And 5 years or 6 years earlier, when he was a player, this guy, my boss, took him a gift at the end of the year, said, "Hey, here you go." And the guy took it, looked at it, goes, "What am I going to do with this?" Threw it in the trash. Well, now 6 years later, he wants a job. What's the same guy? Do you think he got the job? Nope.
Wow.
Because it's how you treat people. And I think that's the biggest thing is, be a good guy. But I think bottom line, you got to put in the work. And I know, I mean, just saw today, what is it, 249 podcasts you've done or something like that. That's what you got to do. You got to maybe get in a different way. And those type of things will really help you when you go to maybe get that one job, because there's going to be 100 guys applying for that one job.
Oh, yeah.
So what makes you stick out?
Oh yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to love what you do too,
Yeah, exactly.
Like you could work as hard as you want to, but eventually if your heart's not in it, you're just going to burn out. Right. So like
Right.
first and foremost, you got to have that passion to go alongside like what your main vision is moving forward. And, like playing 15 years in the big leagues, you tell that story, like, cause in today's world, if you do something wrong 15 years ago, someone's going to find it and dig it up and potentially use it against you if they find it. Right. Have you, again, playing 15 years in the big leagues, 5 years coaching, and now 16 years as an analyst, when you look at the sports world, because for the most part, from what I've seen, everybody seems to be a well-respected professional in the business. Everybody gets along, but then there's always a few people who just, you just get rubbed the wrong way. Have you ever dealt with people that you thought, and not to like name any names, but people that you thought like, okay, they need to work on their attitude a little bit?
There's always guys, no matter what it is. There's guys in the clubhouse that I used to not get along with, but I knew that I had to be able to play with them that night. This didn't mean we were going to go get the, a bite to eat after the game, or we were going to send Christmas cards to each other. But it was a case where you have to be professional. But there are a few guys that you're like, man, why are you that way?
Right.
Because there's a baseball fraternity. There is a player fraternity, there's a coaches fraternity, there's a broadcasters fraternity. And so before every series, where it used to be not this past year, but prior years, the broadcasters like get together before the game and kind of give a breakdown on what's going on. Maybe we haven't seen whoever the Diamondbacks for 2 months. I can read what's happening, but these guys have been watching them every night. You could say, hey, so and so's in a slump. I talked to the broadcaster. They said he's not in a slump. He just hit the ball hard 12 times and hasn't gotten a hit.
Yeah.
So just being able to have that fraternity. So why not help your brother out? And so that's where there's a few guys that, believe it or not, you just don't talk to, and it's a shame.
I'm sure, especially at the big league level, because again, like at that point, you guys are all grown men. You're trying to provide for your families. Like there's the business factor in it where, like you're making money. It's a job. Like it's your livelihood on the line every day, as opposed to like when you're playing in college. Like I feel like it's more of a brotherhood where you guys are with each other every day. Everyone for the most part has each other's backs, but I feel like it's not the same way once you get into the pros.
I would say the first couple of years in the minor leagues is maybe a little bit more like college if you're talking about rookie ball and low A. Once you start to get up a little bit and start to advance maybe to high A, double A, triple A, it's like, okay, if we win, great. I hope we do. But I need to get some hits. I need to do my thing. I need to have a great game on the mound, whatever it may be. It is a little bit more of a business because a lot of guys, at that point have families, and you got to start providing for your family. And the window to do your thing, to make your money, is very short. It's not like, hey, if I'm 50, I could still be playing. It's hey, if I make it to 36 now, that's a long career. And I think that's what the difference is. College is, for me anyway, my best friends are guys I played college ball with.
Yeah.
And I mean, they still bust my chops to this day about stuff we did back in college that luckily there wasn't the internet.
I mean, I'm sure you guys feel that way. I mean, I couldn't imagine, again, in that era, like Pedro Martinez throwing Don Zimmer to the ground. Even
right.
At the time, it was looked at poorly, but looking back on it, like there was really nothing else he could have done. But like in that moment, he would have been beamed on. I mean, just looking back at some of those moments.
Well, you think about all the memes that would come out of it too. It'd be like, oh my goodness, yeah. And so little things like that is. When I look back to where the game was and where it is today, in 36 years, so much has changed. But it doesn't mean all change is bad. That's not what I'm saying. Because there's been a lot of great things that have come out of the game. And the athletes today wow, they're unbelievable. And the way they train year round and what they do, and these freak athletes like Fernando Tatis Jr. is 22 years of age. And my God, I would pay money every day to go watch this young guy play. I mean, so like, I don't want to sound like this old grumpy guy that, the game was so. No, not at all. I love the game and what's happening with it because the players are so good.
I mean, it's unbelievable. Fernando Tatis Jr. is younger than I am. And
crazy,
I think about that every now and then. I'm like, oh man, like what did I do wrong? It's ridiculous. Like this guy is almost like the face of baseball at 22 years old.
Right.
And, it's just insane. I mean, the way that they're able to adapt to with everything going on, like this year, like, what do you think your era would have been like during COVID times without, like, not even 90% of the technology we have today?
Well, I don't know, again, how it would have reacted and what would have happened because when you look at the game, what would happen after a game, we used to sit around and kind of talk about the game. Now you just can't do that because they get to the ballpark so much earlier than we did, but we would stay later. So it was the same amount of time. It was just different the way you do it. I think the technology kind of helps guys now because they can scout an opposing pitcher just a little bit easier. But still, until you step in that box, you don't know what the guy throws. I think the difference today is it seems like everybody throws 100. Oh, yeah. It used to be one guy threw in the mid-90s, and you're like, oh, man, your mind was just blown because this guy's going to just blow my doors off. Now every guy does, and that's a freaky thing about pitching today.
So from your time, like kind of seen how things have evolved over the past, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years. Like we were saying, like the athletes today, a lot more, I guess, well-trained in a way, you could say. Like, what have you seen, the differences between how you guys trained back in the day and how people train today? Is it more of, like diets and everything that's, kind of like amping everything up?
I think diet, I think science has a lot to do with it. I mean, how you can go and put stuff on your body to see biomechanically how you're moving, and is everything synced up. I think that's the advantage that players have today, and they're taking advantage of it, rightfully so. I think the other thing that they're really looking at is analytics. I mean, we had like spray charts, but you just kind of remembered, oh yeah, I remember Jack, he was a pole hitter, so I got to scoot a couple steps over. Now, I mean, they got the wristbands, they're looking, so they got so much more information to use at their disposal. And so I think that's where the game has really helped a lot of players, is be able to break things down in a scientific way that can make them the better athlete.
Right. Do you think the lack of fans hurt players this year, or do you think they
Yes.
were able to adapt well?
I think it did. I think it hurts certain players, because there's certain players that thrive on that adrenaline rush. When you're there's nothing like walking to the plate when there's 40,000 people screaming for you. And conversely, if they're screaming against you, there's just something about that. And there's something you can't, to this day, I still miss. I miss that thrill of hearing the crowd roar when you did something well. So I think there is a certain percentage of the players, it's not an excuse, it's just a fact that really hurt them. I do think it hurts some relievers too, because the relievers are adrenaline junkies.
Oh yeah.
They love to come in and either slam the door shut, or whatever it may be, whatever they feed on, and the crowd gives them that little boost. And then when you're walking out there and you hear this music going and you look around, you're like, there's nobody here.
Yeah.
So I do think it hurts some players this year. Hopefully it doesn't last too long.
I mean, it seems like we're going to try and put things back to normal in 2021. I mean, we'll see what happens in the next few weeks, whether anything changes, but it seems like 162 is the plan, right?
Well, and that was awful nice to hear the other day when the commissioner came out and said that, and just said, hey, we're going to spring training start on time, because I was even sitting at home and thinking, usually after the first of the year, about middle of January, I start to get this feeling of I should be doing something. I should be getting ready for spring training. And so even I was sitting at home going, well, I wonder what's going to happen. And so it was really refreshing to hear that. I think we learned a lot last year on how we can do it. And I think we learned that it can be done. But I think we also need to be able to, have some fans. Now, I'm not saying come back, open the doors immediately to 40,000 people, but it would be nice to have some back in the stadium, the right way, whatever the rules are. But it was refreshing to hear that, because, last year, 60 games, I think the players were happy just to get those in, because when they thought we're not going to be playing at all. So now they say, okay, 162, that's what we're accustomed to.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's crazy to even think that it's been a year. I mean, what?
I know.
10 months since this pandemic started. And it's crazy to see how everybody's evolved and kind of, quickly adapted to everything going on. Like 10 months ago, I didn't even know what Zoom was. And now everybody, like,
right.
It's almost like it was a burden at first, but now I think it's more productive for a lot of people, at least like in the media side of things, like doing interviews with people, like you don't even have to be in the area to just hop on a Zoom call and ask a few questions for whatever, you're writing about or talking about in the future. Do you think that, like this Zoom and all this new technology that we've kind of had to adapt to is going to play a big factor moving into a new normal when it comes to sports?
You know what? That's a great question, because I don't know what the Players Association is going to have to say about it, because I know there were some players that did enjoy just saying, hey, you know what, you got to do this interview today at 3 o'clock. And that was the only one they did because 4 or 5 guys, reporters, bloggers, us were on this call. They did their 15 minutes and they were done. The problem you have sometimes in a locker room is you're there, you come and talk to me, and then somebody else comes and talks to me. Half hour later, I've had 7 guys come up and talk to me, and whether I could have gotten it done in 15 minutes. So I don't know what the players are going to have to say about that. Selfishly, I hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Because I as I said earlier, I enjoy going down to the clubhouse. I enjoy talking to these guys. Daniel Bard won the comeback player of the year for the Rockies. Yeah. I've never met him. Never met him. And now I call the whole year's worth of games, 60 games, calling games, telling everybody how great Daniel Bard was, what a great story this is. Never met the man.
There's no connection, right?
There's no connection. And that's where I hope it doesn't become just that's all we do.
Because then it gets to that point where, again, you're in the booth talking about these guys and you don't know them, and then you say something that they don't like, and then it's right back to what we were talking about before, where it's like, why is he saying this stuff?
Right. Yeah. He doesn't know me. He doesn't know what's going on. And there's other things that the guys will say, maybe not every day you go to the ballpark, you're in the best frame of mind as a player. People might think that's weird, but you know what? You got a family. There was times I'd go to the ballpark, my kids were sick, or I was really worried about something else that was going on, yet I got to go out there and perform. So when you're able to talk to a guy in a locker room and, say, hey, what's going on? How's everything going? You don't seem yourself. They know they can open up to me a little bit, so I can help protect them a little bit, maybe during the game, or tell their story a little bit in a different way, if that makes sense. Oh, yeah. And so that's where you miss that human interaction. And we're born to interact with humans. It's not, I don't mind doing this. This is great. But at some point, I'd like to be able to say hi to you face to face.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's a grind. I mean, I act like I can relate. I can't relate to that at all. Like 162 games plus spring training plus, training day in and day out. Like even off days, you're traveling. Like it's not really an off day. And were there certain guys that you think handled it a lot better than other guys when you were playing back in the day? Because day-to-day routine, keeping it all together?
Yeah. I'll tell you a funny story, because when I was with the Orioles and Cal was going through the Ironman streak, and I started at third base the night he broke Lou Gehrig's record. But prior to that, in spring training, he gave us all Ironman watches. And I'm like, this is weird. Maybe just because he's the Ironman. No, he wanted to make sure everybody was on time to wherever they were going. If stretch was at 3 o'clock, nobody could be late, and your hitting group was this time. And so everybody had a watch. And so you wore a watch during batting practice, which is really weird. But you just knew that, hey, I didn't want to miss what Cal was doing. So, some guys are really creatures of habits. Other guys can just show up, do their thing, and they're gifted beyond belief. And it's just everybody's a little bit different on how they do it. But I do think when you look at the 60-game schedule this year, some guys that are more routine oriented and more, I have to have my protein shake at 4:47, and I think that hurt those type of guys just a little bit more because of all the testing and all the protocols that were in place.
I mean, that kind of goes back to, what you were talking about earlier with, like some guys thinking like, all right, this is a business. I got to provide for my family. It's a little different than, the college days when, you're fighting for your brothers. But at the same time, there's those few, like the Cal Ripken Jr.'s, the Derek Jeters, the Mookie Bettses of today's world, who you can tell are kind of like a lot more, I don't want to say passionate, but at the same time, like this is their livelihood. This is what they've wanted to do since they were little kids. And for whatever reason, it worked out for them. Like God was kind of on their side in a sense of you got to live out these great careers where most things went your way because you were prepared in that sense. Like was Cal Ripken Jr. and like the Nolan Ryans of the world, the more, self-disciplined guys who are like, okay, these guys are above and beyond. And that's why that they were this successful.
Tell you a little story about Nolan. After he threw his 6 no-hitter out in Oakland, and I played shortstop that night, he'd just come off the DL. He throws a no-hitter. He does his interviews on the stationary bike while he was icing, already preparing for his next game. So it wasn't like, oh, I mean, yeah, and he'd thrown already 5 no-hitters. So he could have easily, I got this, and not done it. But there's so many guys that in the game that will prepare for the next day as soon as they come off the field. I mean, I've seen guys, Nolan Arenado, I've seen him in a slump, but I'll see him then afterwards in the cage for another 45 minutes trying to get a swing right before he leaves the ballpark that night, just to make sure that he's right before the next day. You know, Ken Griffey Jr., who I played with in Seattle, Jr. was one of the top 5 most talented players I played with. I played Robbie Alomar, another guy. They could do whatever they wanted on the field. There was nothing they couldn't do. But the one thing I remember from Junior, because everybody thinks about Junior and the sweet swing and the hat backward, Junior was there every day for early batting practice. He was dedicated to his craft, and it wasn't like he just showed up because he's uber talented. No, he put in the work, and that's what a lot of guys do. And if you could see the amount of prep that these guys go into just to play the game's almost like a relief, because now it's just a competing part of it. But the amount of work that these guys put in is phenomenal.
I mean, again, like you guys are at it every single day for 7-8 months, you know, like as soon as you start training camp, mid-February, early March, all the way up until, you know, some guys late October, early November. And, you know, you playing and seeing it now, how did you personally, you know, kind of balance everything out from, you know, playing your career, living your livelihood, you know, kind of having your livelihood on the line in a sense, and at the same time balancing things out with, you know, having a family, having kids, being a dad, being, you know, just Jeff, you know, being the human being. How are you able to balance all of that and, you know, like continue to be happy along the way?
Yeah, it's boy, that's a hard one, because there is a balancing act. And you know, I give a lot of credit to my wife and to my kids. They help ground me at times. My wife never let me get a big head. She always said, "Hey, you know what? You're a dad and a husband first. You're a ball player second, and don't ever forget that." And so, I think that helped a lot. I will say this though. I wish I would have enjoyed playing the game a little bit more while I was playing it, because every day you're trying to, you know, there's certain guys that no matter what happens, they're going to have a job the next day. I played for 7 teams in my 10 years. My last 4 years, I played on 4 different teams. I mean, it's just a lot of moving around and a lot of believing in yourself when nobody else did. But it's also having the support at home. But my point is, not every day that I was like, oh man, I can't wait to get to the ballpark. There were certain days as I'm driving there going, man, I wish I could be out on the lake with with my buddies. But you do it, and then you start to understand what it's like to be a ball player. And one thing I learned in the minor leagues was you can't get too high, you can't get too low, and you got to kind of ride that emotion, that wave of just kind of going along like that. Otherwise, you mentally you'll be worn out by the All-Star break.
Oh yeah, I mean, and you kind of alluded to, and this will be the last thing I kind of want to touch on because I don't want to take too much of your time here. But again, like not, you know, saying that you didn't necessarily, or I guess in a sense, you saying you wish you enjoyed it a little bit more. Like, what exactly do you mean by that? Like on the field, you know, building those relationships off the field, you know, traveling on road trips. Like what specifically?
No, you know, the road trips, everything like that, that's fine. I mean, we travel first class. It's, you know, charter jets. It's nice hotels. So I never want to complain about that, because that sounds really bad.
Right.
Enjoy the moments a little bit more. Enjoy taking the surroundings in just a little bit more, and realizing that, you know what, I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing, it's hey, I'm a big league ball player. And to get to this point, I worked my tail off to get here. And I had plenty of people doubt me and say, no, I'm not, because I wasn't even drafted. And so to be able to say I am into the big leagues, and I'm one of 6% of the guys that have played in the big leagues that have played over 10 years in the major league. So when I look back on it that way, I have a big smile. But sometimes when you're in that moment and you're in that bubble of playing and trying to support your family, and I'm in an 0 for 12, and I don't know if I'm ever going to get a hit again, it's hard to have fun playing the game. And that's where I just said sometimes I just wish that I would have been a little bit easier on myself. But then again, if I was easier on myself, would I have played that long? I don't know.
Exactly. It's kind of like that yin yang thing where you, again,
Yes.
kind of have to like look at, the broader things in life. Like if you're going through, like an 0 for 12, 0 for 20 slump, but at the same time, there's a lot more important things in life that you could be worrying about. And
Exactly.
I feel like there were a few moments that I saw before we hopped on, you kind of enjoying yourself on the field. There was one video of you chasing down a foul ball and a guy spilled nachos on your jersey.
Nachos. I was in Boston.
Was
that
it?
was
That was
cool.
at Fenway?
Yeah, it was at Fenway, and I really should have caught the ball. I missed it. I should have caught it because I could still see it. I was playing second base, and it was down the first base line. I'm looking, and I could tell the wall was getting close to me. And so I just kind of misjudged where the ball was. Luckily, they didn't give me an error. But then I kind of leaned over. Well, he had his nachos sitting right on the railing or on the wall of Fenway. And so I reached over and I got nacho sauce all on the front of my shirt. So I was like, what the hell? So I grabbed a chip and took the nacho sauce off my shirt and ate it. And the guy laughed. I laughed.
Yeah.
It was a good time. Yeah, I mean, certain things like that you remember and you have a good time. I think the best part for me was my last year because I kind of knew it was my last year. And my son, who was 8 at the time, this was back when kids could bat boy before age 13.
Right.
And he bat boyed first for about 50 games. And so to be able to bring my son to the ballpark with me every day, and we're playing day games in Wrigley, and watching him bat boy, and Sammy Sosa hit a home run, he'd go to home plate, grab his bat, and give him a high five. I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool.
I mean, those are life moments that you remember forever as a kid. That's what kind of probably, sets you up for what you want to do later in life. It takes a few twists and turns, but like you never forget moments like that.
Right, exactly. And that's the fun thing about it. There's always things that my kids remember about whatever it may be, that I'm like, oh, I didn't even think you remembered that. And so to hear them tell stories of what it was like to be able to go in the locker room or go down in the dugout, or, my son, when I was playing for the Brewers, he was, I forget how old he was, 4 or 5. And he saw Bernie Brewer without his head on because of the costume. He had it off to the side. And I remember it devastated my son. It was like, oh, Dad, Bernie didn't have his head on. And so it just little things like that is so cool to listen to them tell stories about what it's like. So I'm fortunate to be able to play as long as I did and to be in this wonderful game for 36 years, and I hope it lasts a little bit longer. But if you would have asked me, a kid growing up in Sedona, Arizona, and had to walk on at junior college, didn't get drafted out of college, and then to play, 15 years, I've been blessed.
Oh my God. And that's such a funny story about, Bernie taking off his head, because like, you can't do that, like,
right.
But
he was underneath though.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you do that at Disney World, you get fired, like on the spot.
Right. No, but Bernie, I have to think he may took off his head. He might have even been smoking a cigarette. I don't know.
Not a good look. Not
at all.
Last question for you. Is it true that you asked Nolan Ryan for an autograph while you were his teammate?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'll give you the cliff notes because this is a story that whenever I'm with Nolan, he loves me to tell. Okay, so I had just gotten traded from the Texas Rangers, or excuse me, from the Montreal Expos over to the Texas Rangers.
Yeah.
So the first day over, we're playing the Pirates in Bradenton. So I flew from West Palm to Bradenton. I played a game. The next day, Bobby Valentine's our manager. He says, hey, you've made the team. We break camp in 3 days. I want you to stay back. There's going to be a simulated game. Nolan's going to throw. There's going to be about 4 or 5 of you guys that are going to stay back and hit. We'll put minor leaguers out in the field. Just enjoy, catch your breath, and have a good day. Perfect. So I go up to bat against Nolan, and I'm like, holy cow, this is Nolan Ryan. Now, so what happens was I get a base hit my first time. Okay. Next time he walks me. Now, this is happening pretty fast because there's only 5 of us hitting. So next time I hit a double. Next time he walks me. Next time he says to me before I go to the plate, he goes, boy, how many hits you got off me today? And now I'm scared. I'm like, dude, we're on the same team. And he's got his hat pulled down like this.
Yeah.
He's on the mound. And I said, none. He goes, good answer. And now I think I'm going to get one right in the ear. I think he's going to ear hole me, and we're teammates. Breaks my bat. I hit a little floater right over the second baseman, broken bat, little single, and I'm on first base. He looks at me and just kind of gives me a smile. So now we're done. So we go back in the locker room. I've got my bat. So I walk over to I say, hey, Mr. Ryan, would you mind signing this bat for me? So he did. I still have the bat to this day, obviously, but yeah, he signed it. Yeah, I asked him for his autograph.
Wow, do a lot of people do that?
No.
That's funny. I was gonna ask if you still had the bat. I'm like, that's impressive.
Yeah, I do. And I don't know what came over me to ask him to do it, but it was only my first day, my second day there, my first day meeting him. I was like, yeah, what the heck? So yeah, he enjoys me telling that story. And the great thing about it is, to his teammates, he was much different than what you saw on the mound. Because I used to, that first year, after that moment, we just kind of connected. So after that first year, I would call him up, or he would call me up, hey, you want to go to lunch or something like that, in my hotel room, because we didn't have cell phones. So he'd dial, room 714, and, you want to go to lunch? I said, sure. I said, only if you're buying. Because I'm like, I'm making the minimum then, it was still great. It's like 100,000 at that point, but he's making $1 million. I'm not buying lunch. Are you crazy?
That takes a lot of balls, man. I mean, that's you only live once, I guess. That's one of those.
That's right. Well,
like,
what's the worst he's going to say? No.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like a lot of people, especially today, wouldn't take a chance like that. Like,
Right.
what's the worst that could happen? You get turned down.
You turned down, so what?
Dust yourself
So
off.
what? Yeah, but now, because I asked him, I've got a broken bat signed by Nolan Ryan that I got to hit off him, and there you go. It's part of my collection.
I mean, that's an amazing story. And again, Jeff, I want to thank you so much for taking, like the last hour out of your morning. Hopefully I didn't take too much of your time here.
No, it's been fun.
Talking. I'm glad you had fun. And I hope you guys get to get the 162 in this year. Hopefully things will be normal. Hopefully you guys will, I don't know if you traveled for spring training in Arizona with the Rockies.
Yeah, I'll go down there. I'll be down there about a month. Doesn't mean I'll go to the stadium every day, but I got a place down in Arizona, so I go down there and hang out and go to the games. I don't know how much traveling we're going to do this year with the club. I do think it's going to be a little bit like it was last year. We do a lot of studio stuff, and then hopefully in 2022 we get back to traveling.
Well, hopefully you guys have a safe season. Hopefully it's a lot more energetic than it was last year, a lot more normal for you guys. And hopefully things get better here moving on forward. Because, again, we really don't know. It's crazy times.
It is. But, no, I appreciate it. This has been fun. And good luck to you in your career.
Thank you so much, man.